Now, this is Maury Miller, and it's December 11th, and I'm speaking with Al Wernze, and so I'm going to ask, first of all, Al, when and where were you born?
Well, I was born November the 5th, 1949, actually in St. Anthony's Hospital in Terre Haute,
Okay.
Indiana.
But then, where were your parents living when you grew up?
Well, and my parents were living in Darwin Township in Clark County, state of Illinois, really about 4 miles from Route 1 down the Zion Road.
Okay. And who were your parents?
My parents was Wilbur Antone Wernze, my father, who was known as Tony Wernze. My mother was Ruby Jean Wernze. Ruby Davidson Wernze was, Ruby Davidson was her maiden name.
Okay. And you had some brothers?
And I have two brothers. I'm the youngest one. And my older brother is Tom Wernze, and my middle brother is Danny Wernze.
Okay. Have you always lived in the Marshall area?
Yep, I've always lived in the Marshall area except for a few months when I was in officers' basic training in Fort Riley, or actually in El Paso, Texas.
Okay.
But other than that, I've always lived where I'm speaking to you from this house. I've lived here since 1973.
Well, let's talk about what you remember about the places where you lived and as you grew up. What are your memories about that house and those places?
Well, my memory, that's a pretty broad subject. My earliest memories, of course, were of my grandparents and my parents, and the place that I lived was, I consider, kind of unique. It was a German community for the most part. The Millers were up the road. The Finkbeiners were there, and the Tingleys were down the road south of us. And one thing that I had the fortune of being born in a family with a lot of relatives. And a lot of the community was related to me. My great aunt was a half a mile north. My grandparents were down the road. The Mowers that were my relation was was west of us a little bit. And so I had a lot of relatives to go see, and we had family dinners and everything, and we'd lived in the community for a very long time. My family has, so it was interesting growing up and in a large family.
Okay, so there were lots of cousins for you to be around, play with?
A lot of, although, you know, when I was born, there wasn't too many kids in the neighborhood, older relatives and so forth. But there wasn't too many kids. Down the road was the Seidel boys, and there were three of those, Ricky, Ronnie, and Larry, and I would ride my bicycle down there and play with them, again, my cousins. And so I'm related, my grandfather was a Davidson, and my grandmother was a Seidel, and so several Seidels lived down there, and a lot of that area was owned by the Davidsons, my grandfather's family. And my father's family lived down at West Union. And they were Wernzes, of course. My father's father, my father's mother was a Manhart. And there was lots of Manharts, about 11 Manhart kids down around West Union. So I have many uncles, great uncles, and so forth down around West Union when I was growing up on that side. So, related many people in the county.
Well, let's talk about some other things you remember about growing up. Did you have chores? How did you spend your time?
Yes, I had chores. Of course, we had a milk cow. I'd have to get up and milk the cow. My two brothers were about 8 years older than I was. And so, you know, when I got old enough to do chore work, they were somewhat older. but, yeah, I had to go feed the cows and work on the farm and so forth. So, you know, from the time that I can really remember, had to do chore work, you know, and then later, of course, in high school, I became interested in studies, and so I was kind of a studious person, and so, but on the farm, I definitely helped on the farm, baling hay, feeding the cows, helping pick corn, drive trucks, you know, on and on and on.
But do you remember playing? How else did you spend your time?
Oh, well, being not too many kids my age, except my brothers, and so it's a little bit lonely for me. So I had to play by myself a lot, back in the woods. So I had to invent games that I could play by myself, and we had a large area there, you know, 600 acres to roam around on, and so and then all the cousins' grounds, so I had a very large area to play in, and so I would play in the woods and in the wintertime go ice skating, but a lot of time by myself. But I did have some neighbors halfway my age, the Reisner boys, and family of Wills Reisner south of the Zion Church. And I would ride my bicycle over there, and Kenny and Steve Reisner, and we would play, you know, and doing stuff, and but mainly back in the woods doing, you know, just hiking, roaming around, you know, playing in the creeks and hunting and doing that sort of thing.
Do you have church memories?
Yes, I went to the church, Zion Church. That was my home church, and usually every Sunday we would go to the church, and a lot of my friends from school actually went to the church. And our preacher, for most of the time that I went, was Reverend Johnson. And he had a couple of sons, and one was close to my age, Benny Johnson. And so we would have church socials and stuff that I would go to. And we'd play football games at church and all of that stuff, and see Paul Tingley's went to church. Paul Tingley, who was in my class, and we were very good friends, and so I'd see him at church about every Sunday. And I think maybe Hawker, one of the Hawkers went there, Norman Hawker maybe, and several boys went there that, you know, that we could play with, and the church was a meeting place, you know, where socially we could talk to our friends. But Reverend Johnson was very, very good. He actually married us, my wife and I. But of course, the old church was the German church, which probably other people have told you that you've interviewed. But I have a funny story. My grandfather, we lived in the area for a long time. The Davidsons came over about in the late 1700s, and Massachusetts, and the Seidels came probably in the 1880s into the area, and but the Davidsons, I think, came to Clark County about 1820 something, so they've been there a very long time. But my grandfather was born in 1874. And his mother would send him to church. At that time, the church spoke only German, and they give lessons in the German church to the English-speaking person, so they could speak German and understand the sermons. And so my grandfather, his mother would send him, and he would skip church and go out in the field and hide until church was over and then come back home. Because he didn't want to have to take those German lessons, and all the people there spoke German, and the Davidsons were English. And of course, he didn't like to speak German and everything, but he wound up marrying a German girl, you know. claricidal, you know, so that was his.
Well, those were the ones that were there, so yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and my grandfather often told me that a lot of the families were intermarried, of course, around there, because you picked your bride from one of two places. You picked them either at school or you picked them at church, you know, and they were basically the same people. So everybody kind of get intermarried and related, you know.
Well, let's talk about school. What are some of your school memories?
My school members? Oh, gee.
Where did you go to elementary school?
I went to kindergarten in the Ohio school, at the Ohio school. So I went to kindergarten there, and then from there I went to the South Side School. And actually, when I was in kindergarten, between kindergarten and first grade, I had polio. And so, a very bad case of it. That killed me, but I survived. And so they were a little worried about me being able to walk and so forth. But I was able to walk and everything. So I had that between my kindergarten and first grade year. And so they were going to hold me back a year, but the doctor recommended me go and might help my legs and so forth, you know. So, and I really don't have much residual effect from polio that I know of, although you hear polio syndrome coming up later, you know, in life, but I really haven't noticed, you know, anything like that. But I was one of the youngest ones in my class. That's why they was thinking about holding me back. There was only one younger than me. But I went ahead and went to first grade, and you know, my health issues kind of cleared up, and so I went to I actually went to first grade also to Ohio school, and then second grade I went to the South School, and so the South School, the old South School was there, and I went there a couple of years, but then they were in the process of building the new addition to the South School. And then subsequently, of course, tore the old building down. But, so I went there, and I don't have a lot of memories there of my friends playing out on the playground. And then I went to, actually in sixth grade, they sent me to junior high. Had one class of sixth graders that went to junior high, so I went to junior high school for sixth grade with Glennie Berger was my teacher. And so that one grade, sixth grade was out there, and then of course I went to junior high. And did pretty well in my studies, you know, enjoyed school, actually enjoyed school. My two brothers actually hated school, but I enjoyed school. So then I did sports in junior high, some.
What sports did you do?
Well, in junior high, I did not play basketball, but I think we had track in junior high, somewhat. But then in high school, I played football and track. So I led her, I think, all 4 years.
Did you do that all 4 years?
So I was pretty good in football and track.
Good.
So.
Good. Well, what are some of your memories about the household growing up? Did you have special things you remember about events, or about food and cooking, or things the family did together?
Well, you know, of course, when I was growing up, we had there was several of us in the house. You know, I had three brothers, my mother and my father, and we always had a hired man that lived with us. And we also had, at that point in time, and especially before, many people didn't go to the nursing home. So my grandfather Davidson did what they called, the term was called living around. You ever heard that term? Lived around. The old folks will stay, if you, a couple of siblings, that they'll live with one sibling for a while, a month or two, and then they'll go live with another sibling a month or two, until they're absolutely, you know, maybe even die in the home, you know. So my grandfather Davidson was there quite a bit.
Okay.
And so there were several of us in the household. So, you know, it was dinners, you know. My mother was a good cook, and we had big dinners and everything, and a lot of people around the table, you know, because there's a lot of people lived in the household. And I remember family dinners, you know, of course, Christmas and everything, and we would have reunions, you know, have a Davidson reunion that we'd always go to. And the Seidel reunion was held at Polly Dean's house, which was my grandmother's sister. And of course, she lived to be an old age. She was about 101 or 2 when she died. And she lived just right north of us through the woods, you know, half a mile. But we'd have large family dinners for the Seidels there, and they were excellent cooks. The Davidsons were terrible cooks. The old Davidsons, they were good at making money, but they were terrible cooks. They would bring an old loaf of bread and some bologna or something, you know, but you're about starved to death at the Davidson reunion. But the Seidel reunion, the old Germans, ooh, they were about the best cooks there was.
Did you have hobbies?
Oh,
How did you spend your time?
oh, school was, you know, and hunting. You know, I would
Okay.
hunt some, and but I was kind of a studious type person.
Well, let's talk about after you got out of school, out of high school. How did you do?
After I got out of high school, well, I went to Rose Hallman over there, and that was a traumatic experience.
Why traumatic?
Oh, well, you know, I was very good at math and science at Marshall High School, but you go over there and you're immediately put up against the best of the best, you know. Some of my friends, one of my friends scored a 1,600 on his SATs and tested out about his whole freshman year, you know, so everybody had brains hanging out their earlobes over there. And 315 started and 150 graduated, so you look next to the guy next to you, one of you is going to flunk out. Either that or don't like it and leave. You know, that happened quite a bit. But, and so, you know, I had to really buckle down, study. It wasn't any playing around at all. You know, studied hour after hour after hour to make it through. So I was in aerospace engineering. So I graduated there in 4 years, but that was, you know, after I become a junior, I figured I'd make it, you know, so it kind of slacked off a little bit, and I had a little bit more fun. I joined a fraternity over there, and subsequently, when I was a junior, well, at the end of my junior year, I got married. So that was at the end of my junior year. But Rose Hallman was, at that time, is Rose Polytechnic Institute, and it was an all-male institution. And
Well, with all that pressure and you got married, the senior year must have been really hard.
well, it wasn't too bad, you know. Like I say, the pressure was off. You kind of learned how to manage your time, and you learned what you actually had to do in order to pass, you know, and they were a little better to you after you was a junior. And when you was a freshman and sophomore, they just seemed like they wanted to get rid of you, you know.
Okay.
So, and so the pressure was kind of off. But,
Okay. Okay, and then after college?
well, then after college, I was in ROTC in college. And so the Vietnam War was going, of course. And so beginning of my junior year, everybody at Rose Hallman has to take freshman, sophomore year ROTC. Oh, before we get that, I kind of want to tell you, you know, I went to Rose Hallman Institute. I went to Rose Polytechnic Institute, and I was the last class to graduate from Rose Polytechnic.
Rose Polytechnic.
Yeah, and then I was there in the auditorium when Tony Hallman come in and give all the money to Rose Hallman and
Now
change
it's
the
Rose
name.
Hallman.
Yeah, so now it's Rose Hallman. But so anyway, at that time, I don't know now, but at that time everybody had to take ROTC the freshman and sophomore year. for physical exercise and all that. And then you had to decide at the beginning of your junior year whether to go to advanced or not. Well, they hadn't come up with a lottery yet for the draft, you know. And so I had to decide whether to go advanced, actually about 2 weeks before they drew the lottery. And so I thought, well, I'll probably have to go anyway, so I want to go as an officer. And so I signed up to go as an officer. Well, subsequently, my number was 315, so I wouldn't have to go.
Yeah.
But I'd already committed to go, you know. And so, and then at the end of my between my junior and senior year, I had to go to Fort Riley, Kansas for 6 weeks basic camp. And so I did that. And right after I was married, and so that wasn't very good. But so they put me out on the prairie in a foxhole, more or less. But so then I completed my senior year, and after that, I had a year's extension to work before I had to go to the military. And so I was looking around, and not too many places wanted to hire you because I had to leave at the end of the year. So, but Eastern Express Trucking Company hired me as an engineer for them. And they were a pretty large company there in Terre Haute, well, larger than Terre Haute. And so I took a job with them. And then after I was there for a year, I went to El Paso, Texas for 3 months officers basic training. And that was interesting. And had a pretty good time down in El Paso, Texas in the military. And I could take my wife with me, which I did. So we had stayed in an apartment complex with 3 swimming pools. So I thought that was pretty good. It didn't have to stay on base. So then I come back, and then I worked for Eastern Express for a while. And then I took a job of course I was an aerospace engineer, rocket scientist, okay? And so they landed on the moon in 1969. And then after that, they decided not to go back after about 1971 when I graduated. And so all the aerospace engineers were out of a job, you know. So, but I was also could do mechanical engineering because I had almost identical courses, except I had some more to be an aerospace engineer. But anyway, I was offered a job down at the Heath Candy Company. So I worked down at the Heath Candy Company for about 2 years. And I was their manager, all of their distribution and all their order processing. And so did that for a couple of years, and then I had to decide to come back to the farm. So I come back to the farm and liked that better, so I've been there ever since.
Ever since?
Yep.
Okay, and still doing it?
Yep. 1975 is when I come back to the farm.
That's almost 30 years then.
Yeah, it's a long time. Yeah, about 40 years.
Well, let's just talk about things in general. As you look back on the whole history of your life, was there a particular person or particular people that you thought made a big influence on you that you particularly remember? You don't have to, maybe not, but I just that's one of the questions I have on my list here.
Some teachers at school, you know. Several of those, you know, influenced my life. Probably math and science. I probably learned more off Ted Callis than anybody else, actually.
You're one of the few people who would actually say that. But
we had, actually, in my class, I had Steve Krummer, and I don't know if you know him, but Steve Krummer's a very smart guy. And Tim Cork and some others that were pretty studious, actually. And so we could really get what Mr. Callis was saying. You know, and so he liked us, and so we learned actually quite a bit off of it.
Good, good.
So we did that, you know, so that was influential. My grandfather, Davidson, you know, lived with us and would tell me about the old times, you know, because his life was absolutely amazing. Being born in 1876, he was born before the first automobile, and he lived to see a man walk on the moon. So that particular lifespan was amazing. And he remembers the old stuff. You know, he was in the first jail and courthouse in Clark County. he took my brother Tom down there and showed him where it is. And we farmed the field, actually. It was owned by the McClures, and it was owned by Alfred Seidel. But it was interesting to know where the first jail, because I don't think anybody knows where it was except my
I
brother
didn't
Tom
know.
and I.
I had no idea of
It
that.
was located in the town of Aurora, Aurora Bend, before it moved to Darwin.
Uh-huh.
And it's kind of funny because my grandfather, being born that early, said, told my brother one day, I know where it is because I was in the building. So that was pretty straight-hand information. Took him down, showed him where the building was. Well, probably 25 or 25 years ago, we were farming that field and we struck a rock in the exact location. So we went and dug it out. So we actually have the rock of the first courthouse.
Foundation.
Yeah, that's a rock about that big around on that place. So
Oh.
I've told, actually the field is owned by Keith Perry, but I've told him we really ought to, we have possession of it, that if he wants to, we should put that on courthouse lawn, probably, because that's the only thing that's left of the first courthouse of this county.
Wow, that's quite a story.
Yeah. But my grandfather would tell me stories about loading corn on all the river boats, that went through Darwin, and there was actually a wharf on us that they would load river boats in the spring, and then in the springs when the river boats went down the river when the river was high, and so they would sack the corn and stack them up on the bank. Then they would carry them on the boats, and he'd tell me stories about that. And he would do it there and also down in Darwin. Of course, they were very familiar with Darwin. Darwin did the grocery shopping in Darwin, and stuff. So,
So Darwin must have been a recognized port, a recognized stopping area?
oh yeah, well, it was the only one. Of course, Darwin. In fact, I own part, about 40% or so, of the oldest business in the county, the Darwin Ferry. It is the oldest business, probably in any place in Illinois, I imagine, because we've been running it since 1818. And so Darwin Marshall wasn't found until 1836, and so Darwin was it. Probably, of course, the first one was Vincennes, the French, Vincennes. But then I would say probably Fort Harrison, Terre Haute, Darwin, Hudsonville, all about the same time. But, nothing away from the river much. It was all right on the river. And so the town of Aurora was number one. And then they moved it to Darwin, which was called McClure's Bluff, which was Alfred Seidel married Goldie McClure. Alfred Seidel was my mother's first cousin. And her family owned the town of Aurora and owned Darwin. And then they changed the name to Darwin. I don't know what town that was, but they moved the county seat there. I don't know. It's on the plaque down there, whenever it was. It's in the history in 1820 something.
Wow.
And then Darwin, then Town Marshall was finally founded in 1836, and then they moved it up here.
Well, let's talk
But all the early history was nothing to do with this place. It's all Darwin, And
Let's
then
talk about
the original road went from Darwin and come up through us and forded Big Creek, and then went over and wound up there at Fort Harrison. The original road.
Okay.
Followed the river, up
Yeah,
there.
I wasn't aware.
And that was before Route 1's even thought about or anything else,
Some other things that impressed you as you look back on your history. What sort of national events or historical events made a big impression on you?
That made a big impression on me. Oh, of course, for several years I was a Republican county chairman here, so quite political. And earliest memories were, I was kind of interested in politics at an early age, and Of course, I remember when Kennedy was executed, was killed, assassinated. I remember that event. But I never was, might call me a little bit of a redneck, never was impressed with hero worship, ever.
Okay.
Ever, ever. I always looked at my political leaders, and I wouldn't let a president or anybody cut in line in front of me at McDonald's. They just work for me, but so many people hero worship them. Give me a break. That's my feeling. They,
Okay.
if no one, I can kick their butt out in 4 years. But they get to having the God complex, and like they're so important. But that's too bad, because I feel the people are important. My political convictions are pretty strong.
Okay. Now, my next question, Al, is going to make it sound like I'm asking you to think like you're really old. but you have lived
I am
a good
old.
long.
I'm 65.
You have lived a good long time. So the next question is just what inventions have occurred in that lifetime that surprise you, that you think
The
about?
inventions?
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of an interesting subject, because being a technical person, I was closer to it than a lot of people. By education, not by vocation necessarily, but when I went to Rose-Hulman, we had the latest stuff. Being an aerospace engineer, we had the latest IBM computer, and but the calculating machines were just starting to come up. The actual calculating machines, we had a computer with punch cards, that we could write. I was taught Fortran, I could do my own programming, I kind of knew how they worked, so I could write my own program and stuff, take your blank cards in, type them out, and give them in, and you'd write your own programs and all that stuff. But the actual calculating machines, most of them were the big old calculating machines that, would grind out mechanically the numbers. But they just got Wang in electronic calculator. And Texas Instrument had just, invented the integrated circuit. And, well, before that, they innovated Shockley, or whoever it was, invented the transistor. But then Texas Instrument, Gilby, or I forget what his name, but anyway, he invented the integrated circuit, and then that allowed them to make miniaturized circuits to do our regular old calculator, that everybody has, and so that was amazing, because we got one of those, and but they didn't have very many of them. We were all using slide rules. In 1967, when I started school, it was all slide rules. I still have my big old slide rule. And so we all had slide rules that had to do all our calculations. And but I was there when it started happening. When the calculators were just starting, and so all the engineers, really right after my time, all went to calculators instead of slide rules. And also they had the TV tapes, that they were starting to make them smaller, like the betas and the VHS tapes and everything. And they had one brand new over at Rose-Hulman, and they taped the Apollo 11 launch, with it, something really like brand new, technology, so that was interesting. And so that first technological, just kind of going on from electronics was the big thing, But of course, technologically, by the time I was born, they'd already invented the atomic bomb, so that was the hydrogen bomb, that was already existed. So I didn't witness that, but I witnessed the revolution of the electronic revolution, And the miniaturization of everything.
Right.
You know, miniaturization of TV sets and mass production of TV sets and make them so much cheaper. And the invention of the liquid crystal sets, you know, and the invention of LEDs, you know, light emitting diode sets, and all this technological march. And then later on, you know, after school and so forth, the invention of the internet, you know, and all of that stuff. And then, you know, the technology breakthrough and energy development. You know, we're still trying to develop fusion, which they just can't quite get, but we still haven't, you know, in technology been able to develop really cheap energy. You know, they can develop it all right. I mean, nothing is cheaper than atomic reactors, but it's so dangerous, you know, and radioactive material to store it after it's done. You know,
do them, yeah.
You know, nothing simpler than putting two things close together and get unlimited energy. That's awfully simple to do, you know, but the problems with it, if they just get the fusion done, but that technology is not here yet, but the satellite technology, you know, launching all the satellites, with, you know, I remember the first one launched, you know, in 1957 or 8, and witnessing, of course, being an aerospace engineer, that was very interesting to me, and watching von Braun on TV, you know, Warner von Braun doing all this stuff, you know, and that was very interesting to me.
Now, Al, I have one last question.
Yeah.
It's about Marshall.
Yeah.
If you were to
you asked me about my hobbies. Yeah, well, my hobbies now.
Okay, yeah, tell me about your hobbies.
Well, I'm a walker. I do walking.
You do walking.
My wife and I love to travel, so we take a lot of cruises. So we cruise all over the world. You know, we cruise a lot of different places, and we do that. And Omer's son walks with me, and so we backpack across Europe. So he and I walk the Camino de Santiago. You ever heard of that?
Oh.
We walked 500 miles.
You walked 500
Yeah.
miles, but you did.
Top of the Pyrenees to Santiago. So you're one of the few people who know about it then.
Oh, that is just supposed to be the most spiritual and uplifting kind of thing.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We did it over a 2-year period. But we started at, actually the first year we started at outside of Manzanillo, Los Mulas, outside of Leo. And then, of course, I didn't know if I'd ever go back, so I wanted to make sure I'd make it to the cathedral, you know, so, and it was a holy year when we went. When they swing the big incense burner and have all the special stuff from the holy year. And so we started out there, and we made it to the cathedral.
Wow.
You know, and I just lots of stories
That's
about that,
impressive.
just with the pilgrims. And then we went back and then did the first part of it 2 years ago. Went to the top of the Pyrenees, you know, and walked down out of the Pyrenees to Pamplona, and then all the way
I have a
across.
friend who did that when she was 70.
Well, I'm going to do it when I'm 71.
Are you?
The next holy year, I'm going to be 71. I think it's 65. Yeah, I think it's in 2021. And my son goes with me too, and David Schaller. But his daughter is going to be 11 or 12, maybe 12. And we're going to take her before I get too old to do it. So hopefully by 71, I'm walking it again.
Wow.
That it is actually a beautiful place. Beautiful. It's life altering.
That's what I've heard.
Yeah, life altering. And Aaron and I, in 2001, we backpacked around India, in Kashmir, and we went up through the Himalayas and got up to 18,000 feet. Went up down the Ganges River and Taj Mahal and with the natives, with, you know, the locals, and that was an interesting trek. So that's why I like to see the world, everything in the world.
Well, I'm going to bring you back to Marshall.
Okay.
If somebody from someplace else came and visited you, How would you describe Marshall, and what would you tell them about why you live here?
Well, I can start with the last question first. Why I live here? Because I was born here.
Okay. Well, why do you
And
stay
I
here?
have been, I stay here because I have been many places. I've been to every state in the United States. I've been in many countries. And I love to go to those places. But I've never found any place I like better than Marshall. But it's kind of a unique situation too. You know, I've got a nice life here myself because I live here on Main Street. I've worked out in the country. I have lots of places to, you know, room, you know, which many people don't have. You know, on some street in New York or whatever. You know, I've got a lot of room, which I love Marshall. The people are nice. You know, I was on the city council here, and kind of that same subject. You know, we had a committee, and people that wanted to increase the commercial draw of Marshall and bring industry in, and you know, I was kind of a naysayer on that. You know, I would tell them, I said, you know, you think you're wise, you know, when you do all this economic development to help the economy around here. I said, you may think I'm dumb, but you almost need an anthropologist. You guys almost need to hire an anthropologist before you do all this crap. You ought to, and this anthropologist ought to tell you that how the people are in Marshall. And before you start trying, I said, it's so easy to grow a community. It's so easy to do it. They thought it was full of crap when I was telling them this, but I said, it's so easy to grow a community, and everybody does it by increasing your population and bringing industry in and growing. Easy. Easily done. The hard part is to maintain a stable population of 3,500 people or 4,000 people, which we have now, and increase the economic opportunity for the people that is already here without increasing your population. That is difficult. More opportunity, same population. Because, you know, we have a school of 4,000, we have a school of 100, in a high school, 100 kids per class, which is absolutely ideal. It's about the maximum you can know. Every kid in your class is about 100 per person class. And the schools are nice, the crime rate's low, you know, but you start bringing in industries to your town. You bring in other people to your town. Well, they would accuse me of, you just don't like other people coming in here telling you what to do. I said, no, you ought to think about it. You ought to think about what is Marshall? Why is it such a nice town? And you know, how are we going to preserve that? You know, and so I like it because of the mix of the people. We're a bedroom community, and I said, you know, if you want industry, leave it at Terre Haute. Leave it at Paris up there. They get lots of an industry in Paris. But it's funny because those people want to come down here and live. Then they'll drive up there to work. You know, so there's nothing wrong with being a nice bedroom community. And with a mix of people, we've got a lot of poor people in Marshall. You know, we've got all kinds of people. We've got little houses down here. But just because they're poor doesn't mean it's not a disaster. You know, they don't have to be rich. I mean, we don't go hungry, but you got a mix of different people that seems to get along. You know, and that's why I like Marshall. But that answer your question more.
Well, thank you very much. I'm going to turn this